Hey guys, this is NUSensei, and today I'm going to talk about the average person. That doesn't seem very interesting, does it? My purpose is to clarify what I consider to be the average person. Now, I'm noting that it's the average person, not the average archer. These are very different things. The reason why I need to do this is because some people are concerned that the figures that I give and the assumptions I make are too conservative. Things like draw weight and motivation and ability level, I tend to assume a much lower end. And anyone who's worked in the club as an instructor or a coach will generally agree that we will always err towards the lower side. For example, if someone wants to buy a new bow, we generally always say 20 to 30 pound recurve tops. For compound, 40 or 50 maximum, generally down the lower end. And this may put a lot of people off. A lot of people will go, I shoot 50 pounds, no problem. I shoot 60 pound compound, no problem. And the point isn't to boast about our strength and our ego, but to give accurate and meaningful information for people who can handle that sort of thing. Not what we can handle, but what they can handle. One of the problems with defining the average person is that we have a tendency to consider ourselves as average. I'm not a superstar pro athlete, therefore I'm average. This is actually a psychological phenomenon. People simply don't want to inflate themselves to a higher level, so they are simply average. The problem with this is that they will overestimate what the average person actually does. Because many of you are already archers, let's take this to a different context. Now, I've never studied or trained martial arts, so let's say I'm an average person who is starting stick fighting. Okay, so obviously I'm not a master, I'm a complete novice with no training. But here's the thing, how quickly am I going to pick up new technique? As someone already has an interest, as someone who wants to read more or watch more or simply learn more, I am likely going to be someone who will pick things up much quicker than the average person. In that sense, while I may simply become an average martial artist, I'm not the average person. When I think of the average person in this context, I don't think of someone who has a basic understanding of form and technique. I think of someone who has no understanding of form and technique. The person who will hold the stick at the furthest end and swing around wildly and be afraid of the weapon. That is who I think is the typical learner. In archery, to me, the typical learner, the average learner, is the sort of person who, when touching a bow, is afraid of it. They're very timid, they think the bow's going to hurt them, they don't want to touch the string on their face. So they're holding it like this, they're very mild and timid, they don't have the strength or power or stance to get the string back. That is who I think is the average. And I've built that conception based on the hundreds of people I've worked with on the archery range, based on students in schools. There's a big difference between someone who is fit, athletic, and wants to get into it and give it a shot, and someone who is not that interested, who is curious but doesn't want to pursue it. That, I think, is closer to the average than what you may think. Now, a while ago, someone sent me a link to a video on YouTube with a couple of people who are trying archery for the first time, man. I'm not judging them, they're just having fun, there's nothing wrong with that. But this is actually a very good demonstration of what the average person looks like. Let's have a look. So what we have here is a video from Jeff3230. He does a series called Woman vs. Man. And it's a typical challenge where Jeff and his friend Heather, they compete in challenges, and in this case it's archery. Now, if you're an archer, please bear with me. I know the form is absolutely horrible, but I'm not here to judge that. Yeah, there are lots of technical things wrong. Yeah, the bow's too small, and yeah, the form is completely. They've known what they're doing. That's a fact. But I want to point out what people consider to be average. Okay, so in this case, Jeff he gets 3 shots in the bullseye or close to it, so he's actually pretty happy about that. Good for him. Even though he's shooting incorrectly, he gets 3 in the same spot, and that's a pretty good grouping for someone who's never touched the bow before, or so we think. Now, when Heather shoots, Heather is the sort of person who has never used the bow. You can tell by her body language. You can tell by the way she's fumbling with the bow. And when she shoots a bow, it's a wrong grip, it's a wrong technique, the elbow's not in line. It's a very typical novice thing. And her first shot goes far above the target. And she doesn't know why. She's frustrated, she's blaming things. That's part of it. So this is what, in my experience, the average newbie looks like. I'm not saying this in a bad way. If you've never ever handled a bow before, you simply don't know what to do. And this is what we typically expect. To me, this is the average archer. And they all try different things, aiming high, aiming lower, changing the angle point. These are concepts which you have to learn. My point being is, between these two people, even though both of them are extreme novices, many people consider themselves to relate more to Jeff than to Heather. This is a typical hindsight bias, where we keep on thinking that because we relate more to the guy, to Jeff, that he is the average person, that you are average, that Jeff is average. And he's actually not. He seems to be, and I'm just disregarding anything I know about him, just from looking at him, he's a bit more of a hands-on person. And if he is taught proper technique, he might actually be a decent shot. He has a pretty good foundation in terms of his skill level. So, with a proper bow and with proper equipment, he might become an above-average archer. Heather, on the other hand, needs a lot more work. And again, it's not because she's incapable, it's not because she's below average in terms of skill or ability, it's just because she has never learned. And this is the person that we work with on the range. By the way, if there's anything cringeworthy about this sequence, it's what's coming up. Right? There are a few rules you should observe, no matter how good or bad you are, how new you are. Never point a loaded weapon at a person. Now, a lot of people will think the guy is the average archer. The guy, he's the average person who is capable of learning archery. But for me, it's the girl. She's the one who is average. And I don't mean this in a bad, disparaging way. I mean this in a learning way. The people with the lowest foundation. The people who have no knowledge or experience or expectation. The guy is obviously motivated. He already has some kind of basics in the back of his mind. So he's actually not the average person. The girl, she's the sort of person who would come to the range for the first time and learn everything from scratch. Now, she can become a good archer. With some instruction and some training, she can learn proper form in a very short time. But that's the sort of person I think of when starting off. This is why I tend to be conservative with my figures. If she ever asks for advice on buying a recurve bow, I'm not going to recommend more than £30. Just because I don't think it's going to be the best choice. Remember, you can always advance. You don't have to buy one bow and stick with it. But a lot of people out there have very big egos, have very big perceptions of how strong they are. Oh, I'm 14 years old, I can shoot a 40-pound bow or a 50-pound bow, look at my muscles. That's not the point. The point is, if she isn't the sort of person who is motivated to train every day, to go out in the field and shoot and practice and hunt, then she isn't going to progress in the same way as you. That's why I think it's important to distinguish what average means. You have motivation, you have experience, you are not the average person. You need to cut beginners some slack. The more you push the beginner, the more likely they are to drop out. If you push them to buy a 45-pound recurve or a 60-pound compound, then they are more likely to buy it, use it once, and never again. That's the reality. I don't want to make people feel weak or make people feel stupid for not being able to use a heavy bow, but I have to consider the most likely scenario, and that is the easier the learning curve, the more likely they are to stay on. If you are a self-starting, motivated archer and you are talking to another person of like mind, then fair enough. If you know the person and what they want to do and accomplish, then yeah, I don't see why you shouldn't recommend high level gear or heavier poundages. But as an instructor, I never assume that people will be that advanced. Because I don't know you or anyone I'm training for the first time, I will always assume the bottom line, and that is give them the easiest equipment and the easiest, simplest advice. Regardless of age or gender, I'm always going to assume this bottom line, because in the end, if the standard is too low, they can always move up. If the standard is too high, they will drop out. Point being, if you're an archer, don't forget how you started, and remember that not everyone has the same journey as you. If you're a beginner and you're worried because there are other people who are starting out who look natural in the first shot, you can get bullseyes and groupings, and you're fumbling around the arrow on the string, don't worry about it. That's how most people learn. Some people will pick things up faster than others, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. Hopefully this video gives better perspective on the different kinds of people who learn archery. Anyway, this is NUSensei. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.